Hello, marvelous folks. With only a few days left until Halloween, we thought we'd retrace the fabled legend of the infamous ghoul, the Strigoi, who are still believed to stalk the nights in Eastern Europe. Terrifying beings are some of the earliest stories of the undead, dating back to the medieval time. The Strigoi come from Romanian myths and folklore, and they played a huge part in shaping the horror and Gothic stories we know today. This is where it all started. The dead rising from their graves to torment the living. Garlic and silver, those were the go-to ways to protect yourself from vampires and ghouls, hungry for blood and flesh. So get ready as we uncover the secrets of these ancient creatures. Picture a small town in old Romania under the dark of night. When everyone was fast asleep, an old grave began to stir. Let's jump into the origins of the Strigoi. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who are Strigoi? 260. Contrary to popular belief, the Strigoi are not exactly vampires, but they kind of are. Confusing, right? Basically, Strigoi are evil spirits that can possess both the living and the dead, humans, animals, or even non-human entity. Most of what we know about these entities is, for the most part, tainted and distorted by local retellings over the decades. Adrian Creation claims that the Strigoi were originally a part of the Dacian mythos. It is believed that those spirits whose actions were inauspicious or sinful were deemed unfit or unworthy to be granted admittance to the kingdom of Zalmoxis. These stories, however, survive today only through oral reimagining, so the legends are not an exact facsimile of the original lore. Over time, Romanians associated Strigoi with bloodlust, transforming them into the familiar mold of vampires that have featured across novels and films. However, a Strigoi is a banner class of spirit that can include a host of undead creatures, including wraiths, zombies, ghouls, banshees, and nearly every form of lycanthropy, not just vampires. Some of the most commonly attributed features and abilities include shapeshifting into animals and invisibility. Their sole objective is to regain vitality by sucking on their victim's blood. The nomenclature of Strigoi is yet another fascinating topic that linguists study to debunk and establish the creature's reception across a fascinating range of diverse reinterpretations throughout Europe. This brings us to our next section. The origins and etymology of the term Strigoi. 347. The word Strigoi is derived from the Latin root strig or striga, with the addition of the suffix oi, a masculine augmentative suffix found in the names of other classes of vampires from Romanian tradition, such as Maroi or Bosrcoi. We gain further insight into its meaning. What is of interest here is that there are cognates or variants of the root across different cultures in Romance language, serving as a portal that gives us access to corresponding lore, enriching our understanding of a mythos that has permeated our lives and practices for centuries. For instance, Striga or Strega in Italian refers to a witch or sorceress. Analogously in French, Strige is a bird woman who sucks the blood of children. Writer Romanian argues that the name Strigoi is rooted in the Romanian verb striga, which means screech or violent scream. He has also discovered that the name owes its origin to the Latin term strigus, which means slender or skinny. We cannot claim with certainty to point to an uncontested source of the lore or a definitive linguistic cognate. However, there are parallels to the myth of the Strigoi, present across mainland Europe and beyond. There's no single kind that lurks in the shadow. The Strigoi are as varied and diverse as every reimagining and retelling through the year. According to Adrian Creation, in his book Mythology of the Vampires in Romania, there exists a kind that is living. They are called Strigoi Viu, type of sorcerer who steals crops and milk from farmers. They have the ability to manipulate the weather and can deliver death to men and cattle by casting spells. However, the Strigoi Mort, or the spirit of a deceased Strigoi, are considered much more dangerous. Its nature is said to be both human and demonic. He emerges from his grave and returns to his friends and family to lure them into traps by calling on their names at night, to drain them of their life until they die, and join him in death, despair, and damnation. History of Strigoi explored. 626. While it is difficult to ascertain when the onslaught of the Strigoi began, there have been many instances recorded in history, medieval time, to as late as the early 70s and the 2000s. There is no dearth of escapades or sight. Legends are still ripe, as reports continue to emerge from horrifying accounts by the locals in Romania. To us in modern society, the myth of the Strigoi may well be banter over brew, but for the townsfolk in the remotest villages of Romania, the fear is still very real. The Strigoi, for them, is an integral part of their cultural identity and customs that they share as a community. Earlier, possibly the most gruesome known account, tale of Ure Granda from the 17th century. He is also believed to be the first known vampire whose existence has been documented in what is now Croatia, ancient region of Istria, a quaint village called Kringa, witnessed unspeakable horror for decades. A man named Ure Grando terrorized the villagers for nights until the break of dawn. In life, Ure was an eccentric loner, mostly kept to himself. He was a village outcast. Rumors suggested he had sold his soul to the devil. Almost a century had passed when another tale of haunting and carnage emerged. A Serbian peasant named Peter Blagojevic supposedly became an authentic Strigoi after his death in 1725 and returned to his home. He called out to his son and demanded food to be served. After being denied, Blagojevic launched at him and viciously murdered him. In 1909, Franz Hart wrote in his book an authenticated vampire story about a mysterious plague that had claimed the lives of peasant children in a village located somewhere near the Carpathian Mountains. As death tolls amassed, villagers grew weary and began to suspect the recently deceased count, whom they believed was a vampire dwelling in his fortress. Deaths became rampant. Hysteria engulfed the panic-stricken village, who then lashed out in spite and torched the entire castle. Generations have passed ever since, and stories and lore have sprung up of strange occurrences and night prowlers thirsting after blood. Nonetheless, nothing comes close to the eerie and macabre case of Ion Romar, who was convicted on felony charges brought against him amid a series of serial disappearances and murders of women in Bucharest in 1971. During rainstorms at midnight, waitresses would disappear while returning home from work. Romaru was identified by teeth marks on the corpses. It was recorded in the investigation that Romaru was almost always delirious and lethargic, except at night, which is why he was interrogated only during the nighttime, the only time he would be lucid. Moreover, what is particularly unsettling is that Romaru had to be restrained by several policemen after being sentenced to death. However, it was only the beginning. After his execution, Romaru's father died shortly after in an accident. During the investigation of his death, it was discovered that his father had been an active serial killer in 1944, whose fingerprints were an exact match to those of the killer. Moreover, his criminal profile and patterns were remarkably similar to those of his son, Romaru. Some believe that his father's death was orchestrated by the Securitate, the secret police agency that was active when Romania was under communist rule. Today, Romania is no longer a socialist state, but the crippling anxiety and fear of vampires continue to be a nightmare shared by many in the nation. As of today, there are multiple active and operational search and hunting groups that carry out exhumation and incinerate bodies if there are any reports of loved ones calling out at night. The Creation of Strigoi, 240. There are many different ways a Strigoi can emerge to wreak havoc and stir panic among the living. Their thirst for blood is stronger than any other class of vampires like the Moroi or Dampiers. Dimitri Cantum, encyclopedist, folklorist, Theodore Barata, in his book The Traditions of the Romanian People, published in 1882, discusses in great length the nefarious events and conditions that can foster the manifestation of these beings. A living man can transmute into a Strigoi after passing if he is a seventh-born male in his family, if he spends his life dabbling in heresy, squandering his riches on gambling and fornication, if he dies a bachelor, he dies by execution for perjury, and lastly, if his death comes from the greatest among all sins, suicide. In short, we are looking at a gallivanting male who is so entrenched in his ways of sin, violating the word of God at every turn. Given all these facts, chances are he is pretty high up on the list of those who will not make it to purgatory, before lurching forth from his grave to gnash his teeth at the sight of warm flesh and blood splurging forth. Apart from those mentioned earlier, a more certain, or perhaps the swiftest, way of becoming a Strigoi would be when the victim has force-fed the blood of the Strigoi, who was the assailant, and had preyed on the same victim. Different types of Strigoi in Romanian mythology, 230. Adrian Cremin theorized in his book Etymology of the Vampires in Romania that the Strigoi are primarily of two classes, one that is living, who are mostly sorcerers and witches, also known as the Strigoi view, those that become Strigoi after death, known as Strigoi mort. Usually, the Strigoi mort is considered the more dangerous of the two. The Strigoi view are often described as scrawny and usually bald on their head. They don't consume garlic or onion, nor can they stand the smell of incense. During the Feast of St. Anne, tend to sleep outdoors. They have elongated spines that closely resemble the structure of a furry tail. As for the dead or the Strigoi mort, their appellations and features are as diverse and discreet as the lores are. Appear as exhumed corpses who were not buried observing funerary rite. However, what makes them elusive is that the Strigoi are also shapeshifters, who can take on the form of a host of lichen, rodent, bats, and animals. L.C. Reck, renowned French geographer's writings on the burials in Romania, mentions that if the deceased has red hair, is very concerned that he was back in the form of dog, frog, flea, or bedbug, and that it enters into houses at night to suck the blood of beautiful young girls. Protection and rituals to prevent Strigoi, 256. The Romanians have, through centuries, honed and developed elaborate rituals and customs to defend against and dispel the threat of Strigoi. The most common and often mentioned are the use of silver, salt, and garlic. This triumph has emerged as totem, offering guidance and immunity when navigating the presence of a Strigoi on the loose. To identify a Strigoi or a vampire, a 7-year-old boy is made to dress in white on a white horse and is brought to the graveyard at noon. It is believed that the horse will stop where the grave of the suspected vampire lies buried. Elsie, recluse, was particularly apprehensive of vampire. He advised that one way to prevent the dead from rising would be to drive a stake through the heart of the corpse and nail the coffin heavily to ensure the dead remain where they belong. Another preventive method involves exhumation, followed by beheading, and then reinterring the corpse with its head so that if it were ever to wake, do so in the afterlife. In Romania, have developed an array of steps to dispose of a Strigoi. After exhuming the Strigoi, its heart must be removed, in turn must be cut in two. The entire corpse needs to be smeared with pig fat, which again has to be slaughtered on the day of St. Ignatius. Before placing the body back in the ground, a clove of garlic must be pushed under the tongue and a nail driven through the head. What supernatural abilities are Romanian Strigoi believed to possess in folklore? 310. The Strigoi are the most powerful among all the other kinds or classes of vampire. These troubled souls rising from the grave are adept at morphing and shapeshifting, albeit not always. Their thirst for bloodlust must not be confused with the vampire tropes we are familiar with from television. Quasi-sexual undertones. The Strigoi usually have a propensity to prey on those they were once close to in their lifetime, friend, relative, or family. Unlike vampires, the Strigoi feed on their life force via blood, with or without biting. In this case, the blood loss may result from psychic absorption. They can be highly capable sorcerers, well-versed in witchcraft and demonology, which makes them formidable to contend with. Their spells are believed to be highly potent, often causing droughts, thunderous rainfall, and hailstorms that damage crops and fields. They are known to be extremely manipulative, crafty, often luring their prey by reeling them in through voices. Their presence or arrival is usually marked by sinister or violent screeches made by animals or roaring winds at midnight. Sometimes they may even render themselves invisible, much to the dismay of those unfortunate enough to encounter those ghoulish entities. It is popularly believed in Eastern European folk and myths the night before St. Andrew's Day is the most enchanted of nights in the year. It is also the night when supernatural beings like Strigoi are at their strongest and most likely to be seen. As with vampires and ghouls, the Strigoi aren't entirely invulnerable and share nearly the same weaknesses as them. They can be repelled by certain rituals that involve salt, garlic, and silver coin that have been drenched in the blood consumed previously by a Strigoi. They are, of course, barred from consecrated land. Iron dipped in holy water can keep them at bay. Strigoi in modern pop culture, 237. Over the years, the Strigoi has become an iconographic symbol in horror literature, movies, poems, and games. Today, the Strigoi is no stranger to those who take an active interest in the occult, myths, and dark magic. Tales of Strigoi have inspired some of the best-known works in Gothic literature, such as Dracula by Bram Stoker. This canonical work pioneered a radical genre of romance and fiction that still hasn't lost its charm. Poet George Kajbu named the Strigoi, brilliantly capturing the ethos of Romanian communal harmony, chaos. This is portrayed in the light atmospheric horror stirred by the emergence of Strigoi and the ritualistic tradition that safeguard against the dead. The entities are also featured as monsters in the series based on the book Vampire Academy, the spin-off series called Blood, where they appear as fierce, undead creatures that indiscriminately feed off humans and Moroi, who are peaceful. Guillermo del Toro's The Strain in the TV series Vampire are also loosely based on the mythology of the Strigoi. The 6th edition of Warhammer ascribes the name Strigoi to a bloodline of monstrous vampires similar in nature to Count Orlok. And Mike Mignola, Right Hand of Doom, part of the Hellboy, female vampire, declares that Varkala, master of the Moroi and Strigoi. The Strigoi has begun to feature more prominent in games and fiction. Marvelous Verdict, 112. Paranoia of the shape-shifting undead thirsting for blood and flesh, coupled with a deep-seated fear psychosis of witchcraft, has been prevalent among ancient mythic traditions and folklores since the dawn of civilization. The Strigoi myth often gets swept under the rug amidst the humdrum of other vampire myths like the Dracula or the Nosferatu. The mythos of Strigoi are ripe with such awe-inspiring tales of horror that could easily be adapted for a series. It will be a breath of fresh air for the big screens to see authentic Romanian myth and beliefs unfold. We may even witness a rare gem of a slow burn horror like The Witch or The Midsummer. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.